Have you ever met someone who seemed unshakable, calm in chaos, respected without demanding it, and powerful without announcing it? Chances are, that person understood something most of us never learn. That silence is strength, and privacy is power. In a world that begs us to share everything, post everything, and prove everything, the ancient Stoics knew a deeper truth. Some things are meant to be held close, cultivated quietly, and protected from the noise of the crowd. 2,000 years before social media turned every thought into content, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca were already warning us about the dangers of living life as a performance. They understood that the moment you turn your inner world into a public display, you lose something essential. The raw, unfiltered power that comes from doing things simply because they are right, not because someone is watching. In this moment, we're exploring 7 things you should always keep private, according to Stoic philosophy. Ideas that are just as relevant now, in an age of oversharing, as they were in ancient Rome and Greece. If you're ready to build a quieter, stronger, more disciplined version of yourself, one that doesn't need applause to keep moving forward, stay with me until the end, because number 7 might be the hardest one to master. Let's begin. Number 1. Don't speak ill of yourself. We live in an age of self-deprecating jokes and constant self-criticism, as if putting ourselves down first will protect us from the judgment of others. As if mocking our own weaknesses before anyone else can is some kind of armor. But the Stoics understood something crucial. The words you speak about yourself become the architecture of your mind. Every time you say, "I'm so stupid," or "I never get anything right," or "I always mess things up," you are not being humble or being funny. What you are doing is training your own brain to believe a lie, and worse, announcing that lie to everyone within earshot. You invite them to agree with it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself constantly in what we now call meditations, not to tear himself down, but to correct his course with clarity and compassion, treating himself the way a wise teacher treats a promising but flawed student. He held himself to extraordinarily high standards, without descending into self-hatred, because he understood that cruelty toward yourself doesn't produce growth, but rather produces paralysis. There is a difference between honest self-reflection and habitual self-destruction, and most people never learn to tell them apart. The Stoic approach is to observe your flaws without emotional cruelty, to say, "This is where I fell short today," rather than, "This is who I fundamentally am and always will be." Negative self-talk is a private wound you keep reopening in public, and every time you voice it, you invite others to see you the way you've just described yourself, and give them the script for how to treat you. Keep your self-criticism private, refine it, examine it honestly in silence, journal about it if you need to, but don't perform it for an audience. Let your actions, not your insults toward yourself, show the world who you are becoming. Discipline your inner dialogue as fiercely as you would defend a friend from an insult, because in truth, you are the friend who needs defending most, and no one else is going to do that work for you. Number 2, don't boast about self-improvement. This one stings a little. We live in a culture obsessed with progress photos, day 1 of the gym posts, and public declarations of who we're about to become, as if announcing our intentions loudly enough will somehow guarantee we follow through on them. But the Stoics would tell you that real transformation doesn't need an audience, and in fact, an audience often gets in the way of it. Epictetus taught that philosophy is not something you talk about, but rather something you live, day after day, in the small unseen choices that no one applauds. He used the image of sheep, explaining that sheep don't vomit up the grass they've eaten to show the shepherd how much they consumed. Instead, they quietly digest it and produce wool and milk as evidence of what they've absorbed. In the same way, when you truly absorb wisdom, when you truly change, it shows up in your actions, your patience under pressure, your restraint when provoked, your calm in the face of adversity, but not in your announcements or your carefully curated highlight reels. Boasting about self-improvement often reveals the opposite of mastery. It reveals a hunger for external validation, a need to be seen as disciplined rather than the quieter, harder work of simply being disciplined when no one is looking. The moment you turn your growth into a performance, you risk turning your character into a costume, something you put on for others rather than something woven into who you actually are. There's also a subtler danger here when you announce your goals publicly. Research and Stoic wisdom both suggest you can trick your brain into feeling like you've already accomplished something, The social recognition satisfies the same reward pathways that actual achievement would, robbing you of the motivation to finish what you started. True strength doesn't need applause. Let your transformation happen quietly, in the early mornings nobody sees, in the temptations nobody knows you resisted, or in the books you read alone at night while others are scrolling through their phones. When people notice the change without you pointing it out, when they simply remark that you seem different, calmer, sharper, and more grounded, that becomes proof that the change was real. Number 3. Don't be a glutton. Excess in food, excess in drinks, excess in indulgence of any kind dulls the sharp edge of the mind and chips away at your ability to govern yourself. The Stoics placed enormous value on temperance, one of the 4 cardinal virtues, the ability to enjoy life's pleasures without becoming enslaved to them. Seneca, who lived amid the extravagance and excess of Roman aristocracy, warned repeatedly against the dangers of luxury and overindulgence, not because pleasure itself is evil, but because uncontrolled appetite slowly erodes self-mastery until you no longer recognize the difference between your genuine needs and your compulsions. A person who cannot say no to a second helping, a third drink, or an unnecessary purchase is a person who has handed the reins of their life over to impulse, and impulse is a poor and fickle master. Moderation is not about deprivation, it's not about punishing yourself or living joylessly, but rather it's about ownership, about proving to yourself, quietly and repeatedly, in ordinary moments that no one else witnesses, that your desires do not control you, but that you control them. This discipline doesn't need to be broadcast either. You don't need to announce your diet at every dinner party, or narrate your restraint at every meal for the benefit of onlookers. You simply practice it, consistently and privately, until it becomes second nature, until moderation is simply who you are, rather than something you're actively fighting for. A disciplined body often reflects a disciplined mind, and when your appetites are in check, your energy, focus, and clarity multiply. You think more clearly, you sleep better, and you feel less enslaved to cravings that used to dictate your mood and your schedule. Gluttony, whether of food, entertainment, shopping, or endless digital stimulation, scatters your power in 1,000 small indulgences, each one seemingly harmless, but together forming a pattern of surrender. Keep your discipline around consumption private, resist the urge to turn it into a public identity, and let your vitality, your steadiness, and your presence of mind speak for themselves. Number 4. Don't be a big mouth. This might be the most overlooked Stoic virtue in the modern world. This is the art of listening, of holding your tongue when everything in you wants to fill the silence. We live in a culture that rewards the loudest voice, the quickest opinion, and the fastest reaction, where being first to comment matters more than being right, and where silence is often mistaken for weakness or ignorance. But the Stoics revered restraint of speech as a mark of wisdom and self-possession. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, reportedly observed that we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth, a simple but profound reminder that we were built to listen twice as much as we speak. Every word you release into the world is a door you can never fully close again. Once spoken, it belongs to everyone who hears it, and no amount of retracting or explaining can fully undo it. Talking too much reveals your hand before the game has even begun. It exposes your plans, your insecurities, and your half-formed thoughts before they've had time to mature into wisdom or solidify into strategy. Epictetus advised that silence is safer than regret, that it's better to occasionally be thought foolish for saying too little than to speak carelessly and remove all doubt about your foolishness. When you keep your thoughts private, you protect them from premature judgment and criticism. You protect your plans from sabotage or interference, and you protect your energy from being spent in empty chatter that leads nowhere. Listening more than you speak also makes you a sharper observer of the world around you. You notice patterns others miss because they're too busy talking. You understand people more deeply because you're actually paying attention to them instead of waiting for your turn to speak. And you gain quiet leverage simply by knowing more than you reveal. The next time you feel the urge to fill a silence, to prove your intelligence, or to share every opinion that crosses your mind, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself if this needs to be said, if it needs to be said by you specifically, and if it needs to be said right now, in this moment. Often the honest answer is no, and that pause alone will save you from countless regrets. Number 5. Don't be too focused on the future. Anxiety is, in many ways, a form of time travel, your mind leaving the only moment you actually have any control over, the present, and wandering into a future that doesn't exist yet. and may never unfold the way you imagine. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again in the private pages of his journal that the only thing truly ours is the present moment, that the past is gone and the future is not yet real, and that spending our limited energy worrying about either is a kind of self-inflicted suffering. The Stoics did not ignore the future entirely. They planned wisely, prepared diligently, and thought carefully about consequences, but they refused to live there emotionally and refused to let imagined futures steal the peace available to them right now. Worry about tomorrow steals the peace of today, and the bitter irony is that no amount of anxious rehearsal actually changes what tomorrow brings. It only exhausts you before you even arrive there. Keep your fears about the future private. Don't feed them by speaking them aloud repeatedly to anyone who will listen, because voicing a fear over and over often cements it more deeply rather than releasing it. And don't let hypothetical disasters dictate your mood in the present moment. Instead, practice what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control. Focus your energy entirely on what you can influence right now, your effort, your attitude, and your immediate choices. Release your grip on what you cannot control: outcomes, timing, other people's decisions, or the unpredictable turns of fate. When you catch your mind sprinting ahead into imagined catastrophes, gently bring it back, the way a patient parent calls a child back from the edge of a cliff, firmly but without panic. The present moment is the only ground sturdy enough to stand on, and if you keep building castles of worry about a future that hasn't happened, you'll find that you have no foundation left for the life that's actually in front of you today. Number 6. Don't be ungrateful. Gratitude was not a soft, sentimental idea to the Stoics. It was a discipline, a daily practice as rigorous and deliberate as physical training, something to be exercised on purpose rather than left to chance. Seneca often reflected on how quickly we grow accustomed to our blessings, how fast comfort becomes invisible to us, and how tragically we tend to forget the value of something the moment it's taken away. He advised a practice of deliberately imagining the loss of things we already possess: our health, our relationships, and our simple daily comforts, as a way of reawakening genuine appreciation for them before circumstance forces that appreciation upon us. Ingratitude poisons relationships from the inside and blinds you to the abundance already surrounding you, while gratitude, especially private, unspoken gratitude, quietly transforms the way you experience your entire life without you even realizing it's happening. This doesn't mean broadcasting thankfulness for attention or performing gratitude as a trend for others to witness and admire. It means genuinely, quietly recognizing the people, health, opportunities, and small daily mercies that fill your days, whether or not anyone ever hears you acknowledge them. A grateful heart is a magnet for peace. It recalibrates your entire perspective so that even hardship becomes more bearable, because you can see it against the backdrop of everything that's still going right in your life. Keep a private gratitude practice, whether it's a journal you write in before bed, a quiet moment of reflection each morning, or simply a mental review of the day's small gifts. And let that internal richness shape how you treat the people around you, without needing to announce how thankful you are or turn it into a public display. The people around you will feel the difference in your presence and your patience long before you ever say a single word about it. Number 7. Avoid complaining. This is perhaps the most difficult discipline of all, because complaining feels so natural, so justified in the moment, so relieving, like letting off pressure from a valve. But the Stoics saw habitual complaint as a quiet poison, a habit that reinforces victimhood and slowly drains your power to actually act on your circumstances. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor facing plague, war, betrayal, and the daily burdens of ruling an empire, filled his private writings not with complaints about his hardships, but with reminders to endure, to act virtuously regardless of circumstance, to accept what could not be changed, and to work diligently on what could be changed. Complaining rarely solves the problem you're complaining about. Instead, it rehearses your own helplessness out loud. It invites others into your negativity and often drags their mood down alongside yours. And it trains your mind to scan the world constantly for what's wrong rather than for what's within your power to improve. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The Stoics were not advocates of denial or bottling things up. They were advocates of decisive action, If something is genuinely wrong, address it directly, speak to the person involved, change what lies within your power, and accept with grace what you cannot change. But the habitual, low-grade complaining about traffic, weather, other people's minor flaws, or small inconveniences that will be forgotten by tomorrow, that is a slow leak in your energy reserves and a gradual erosion of your resilience and your reputation. Every time you resist the urge to complain and instead ask yourself, what can I actually do about this? You reclaim a small piece of your personal power that would otherwise have been wasted on empty venting. Over time, this restraint becomes a defining trait people will notice, often without being able to explain exactly why, that you don't complain the way others do, and that quiet steadiness will speak louder and carry more weight than any protest ever could. There you have it. 7 things the Stoics would tell you to keep private. Your self-criticism, your self-improvement, your appetite, your words, your future-focused anxiety, and yes, even your gratitude and your complaints, all held close, cultivated quietly, and expressed not through announcement, but through consistent, unglamorous action. In a world addicted to noise, notifications, and constant self-promotion, choosing silence and privacy is a radical, almost rebellious act of strength. You don't need to explain your discipline to anyone. You don't need to prove your growth with evidence, and you don't need to perform your emotions for an audience that will forget them by tomorrow anyway. Let your calm be the loudest thing about you. Let your steadiness be the argument you never have to make out loud. If this video resonated with you, take a moment to consider which of these 7 you struggle with the most, and start there, privately, today, without telling anyone you're doing it. That quiet beginning is where real change always starts. Some people will disagree that all 7 of these should stay private. Maybe you think one of them is actually worth talking about openly. Tell me which one and why in the comments.